Yeah, good evening, everyone who's listening and who may be listening to this. My name is Daniel, and I am an alcoholic. I have a home group. I have a sponsor. My home group is down at Hanley Beach in Adelaide, South Australia. And this is my story of recovery and how it was and how it is now. Yeah, so I believe I was born an alcoholic. I certainly didn't know that at the time, but my life was ruled by, my childhood was ruled by fear and worry and doubt and dissatisfaction, and nothing was good enough and no one was good enough. I didn't come from a horrific background so far as a family or abuse or neglect was concerned. I had three older sisters who were very much good little girls, I suppose, and were straight A students and didn't have the same fear and terror that I had, having to go to school every day. But I had a good mother. My father was a bit of a deal, but he wasn't an alcoholic, but he had some other issues, and he sort of took off when I was very young, and I never saw him again, and neither did anyone in my family for that matter. But that certainly didn't make me alcoholic. It didn't help my behaviour when I finally picked up a drink, but that's neither here nor there. Like I said, as a child I was just ruled by fear, and when I finally found that drink at around about the age of 13, it certainly took away that fear. My first drink was, my first drunk, I should say. I had a few drinks here and there, family barbecues and things like that. And for my first proper drunk, I was going to a school party. A couple of mates, somehow, I'm not really sure how, I can't remember, we got a hold of a bottle of vodka and a bottle of something that was pretty foul. I think it was Southern Comfort. And we sat around a little park in Woodville in South Australia there, and I just remember sitting down on the grass, and we're all in a circle, and I sat down, this terrified, dysfunctional, miserable, pathetic little child. And by the time I stood up and had my lion's share of that alcohol, I was absolutely fearless. And a lot of people say, that their first drink was a spiritual experience, and I would say that mine was very much akin to that. I just could not believe the change in my personality, the change in my attitudes, the change in my behaviour. It was just chalk and cheese. I became the king of kings, I thought, and I was absolutely sold from the word go. And from then on, I thought I'd found the answer to life, the elixir to life. I thought, this all I have to do to escape this mind of mine and this life of mine and I've always believed that my alcoholism is just a strong aversion to reality. Just I was born with a real problem with the reality, and I thought, this is it, this is the one. And so from then on, I just became obsessed with how do I get this stuff? Do I have to beg, borrow, steal? Like I said, my mother was a moderate drinker, a normal drinker, I should say. My sisters were normal drinkers; they drank with impunity. And but me, that night I got drunk. I went to this school party with those friends, and I made an absolute fool of myself. And I remember blacking out, sitting at a piano and vomiting all over the keys of these pianos, and this poor kid's mother, who was hosting the party, just going, "Oh my God, what have you done?" And that's the last thing I remember. And the next thing I came to in the back of my stepfather's panel van, sitting outside the front of our house, and wondering what happened, and the very first feeling of that guilt, that shame, that remorse, that absolute fear, like, how am I going to go to school on Monday and face this, because I can't remember what happened, what I said, what I did. I did go to school, however, and some of the kids there were like looking at me sideways, and a couple of them said, "You're a disgrace." But, a couple of them came up to me and said, "You're a legend." So I immediately gravitated towards them, and they became my best mates, and there were other addicts and dysfunctional kids, and off we went. And little did I know, I thought I'd found the answer to life, and I thought I'd found the way to fit in, and the way to be confident, and the way to speak to girls, the way to say what was on my mind, because there was a lot on my mind, and but I wasn't drinking. It was just bottled down, buried down deep inside my subconsciousness, and I really did think that this alcohol stuff unlocked a part of my brain that was some sort of genius and could, work everything out, and tell everyone about their problems, and but it was all lies, and basically, it was just a slow descent into hell. And, I had some promising starts in life. I was no doing. I graduated from school, and so I graduated from school, mainly because my 3 older sisters did, and my pride wouldn't allow me to be the only failure in the family. So I stuck that out. But once I'd finished school, there was no university for me. It was just get a job, get money, and by this stage I was already taking copious amounts of drugs as well. I just realised that anything that would change the colour of my day, give it to me. I didn't care if it was a dog pill. I really didn't care. It was just like, if this gives me that escape from reality that I craved, then give it to me. And so I was smoking a lot of marijuana, or taking a lot of LSD, and whatever in between drinks. I was, like I said, I was no deal, and I was a very talented athlete. Probably that was the only place that I actually wasn't drunk, on a football field, where I actually felt like I fit in. And the only reason I felt like I fit in was because I was better than everyone. And I always wanted to be better than everyone, and actually alcohol certainly made me feel like I was better than everyone. But I when I first got sober, I used to say, it was a lot of fun in the beginning, but the truth is, I was having a lot of fun. But I can tell you what, no one around me was having any fun, because I was a vicious person, and especially my tongue. I had a vicious tongue, and I would tear strips off people, and especially the people I loved. And if I knew you, the more I knew you, the more I knew where to stick the knife in, because I knew more about you. And I just became a horrible human being. I was raised with some good ethics, and I had a wonderful mother, and she instilled some good values into me and my sisters. And but as soon as that drink came in, those values went out the window for a good 20 years. And like I said, I carried on, and I had no idea I was an alcoholic. Of course, I had no idea what an alcoholic was. Well, you hear it a lot in the rooms, the old man under the bridge, with the paper bag, or someone who's, got nothing and lost everything. And by that stage, I certainly had nothing, and I hadn't lost anything, really. I'd lost my dignity quite a few times, and I'd lost my freedom several times, by being locked up overnight. I'd lost a couple of mates by the time I was in my early 20s, because they just couldn't cope with my behaviour. I lost the respect of, I guess, my sisters to a degree as well. But, I still thought I could carry on. I thought, no, I'm just young. I'm in Australia. That's all right. This is what we do. We're getting away with it, and there's not huge consequences. But, I just kept having these promising starts, and then I'd have these disastrous finishes. And what happened is, those disastrous finishes and disastrous endings and disastrous consequences just piled up behind me until there was an absolute mountain of shite. And I found it, as time went on, as years go by, I had a couple of kids. I had a child to this woman, and I had a child to that woman, and I'd have really good starts in careers, and really good starts in relationships and tenancies and jobs, and friendships, but that all get, the alcohol would put paid all of them, and this mountain behind me would just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and my reality got harder and harder and harder. So as that got harder, my drinking increased more and more and more. They say it's a progressive disease, and it certainly was for me, because I just would wake up in the morning and couldn't face life. I couldn't face life. When I had that first drink at 13 or 14, and that gave me that spiritual experience. I had no idea that, 10, 15 years down the track that I'd have to wake up and have 2 litres of wine for breakfast just to face the day, just to walk out the door. And that's how I was. And in the end, I became worse than an animal. And those 2 children didn't, at the end of my drinking, I'd lost all my friends, every single one of them. My sisters, as much as they loved me, they just said to me, "Daniel, we love you, mate." And same with my mother. My mother said, "We love you, but please don't come near us when you're drinking." And I respected that. So all that really did, like I said, I had no friends. My children were out of my life. I couldn't work anymore. I was just a bit too sick. I was, and I was only 34 years old, and so I thought I'd go to rehab and do the rehab rounds, the rehab, recovery, relapse kind of cycle. And, I did go to rehab, and I went there for a good 6 months. And I think the thing about rehab was it certainly, I don't regret it, and I was very, very grateful to get there, and it sort of changed the course of my life. And I would go there. I learned why I drank. I did learn a little bit about this disease, this mental, physical, and spiritual illness. But once I got there, I just got a little bit too super well in rehab, and it was like this hyper recovery. You're wrapped up in a bit of cotton wool and a bubble, and you can't drink, and you're just talking. And so I left there, and like I said, I learned why I drank, but I didn't learn how not to stay, not to pick up a drink again, which is the key part, because like they're saying, alcoholic can stop drinking, when the shit hits the fan, excuse my French, but you might lose, have the car crash, or lose the friend, or lose the wife, or lose the job, and it's like, all right, I'm going to stop now. But as it says in our big book, without help, it is too much for us, and without help, it was certainly too much for me. And so I did a few rehabs, and I learnt some lessons in powerlessness. I went to AA for a little bit, and I just wasn't in AA. I was around AA. I just looked at those steps, and I looked at these old people with loads of years up. I didn't go anywhere near them. I'd hang around newcomers, and we'd sit out the front, and we'd have our smokes, we'd chain smoke, and go, God, this is a crocker, what? And we'd all agree, yep, no, and off we'd go into the sunset. And it was no sunset for me. It was just going further and further and further out to sea. And that's all I was. And by the time I finished drinking, I was very far out to sea, and the sharks were circling. And I was 39 years old, and I'd been drinking at least 10 years past my use by date. I had honestly not had a fun time in 10 years. I can say that with all conviction, that I did not have any fun. I was drinking against my will. I was drinking around the clock. I was extremely sick. I was in, to be honest, I didn't have a lot of emotional pain, because I could only experience emotional pain when I was sober, and I wasn't sober. I was drunk around the clock, and when I was drunk, I didn't give a flying frog about anything. So I thought, if I just stay in this state, then I won't have to feel, and that's what I did. And but then I don't know. I had my last drink in very early March, the second week of March 2012. So we're talking, about 11 and a half years ago now, and basically I came to in my little housing trust unit down in Henley Beach there, and I was covered in blood and piss and had injuries, and that wasn't extraordinary. That was quite normal. I was actually quite happy that I'd made it home, because I didn't normally make it home. I'd wake up in a jail cell, or on a beach, or on a park bench, or in a bush, or in some strange place. I was, I'm a checkle. I've got my wallet. That's an extra bonus. But the story is that I just woke up, and I just could not go on anymore. I was tired of living. I was scared of dying. I had no idea how to get sober, and I thought, I've tried the rehabs. tried the detoxes, I've tried the counsellors. I even thought I've tried AA, and that doesn't work. The truth is I hadn't tried AA. I just went there and sat on my ass and listened and did nothing. You know, there is another saying that says half measures avails nothing. And my half measures availed me nothing. All it availed me was more misery and more lessons in how powerless, you know, I am over that first drink. You know, I have no mental defence against it. If it comes in and I've got no program, no AA, and no high power, I'm a sitting duck. And for some reason, I don't know why, I wasn't religious and I wasn't spiritual at the time, but I was sitting in my little unit and just reassessing my life, and just for a minute there, the sum of all things came bearing down on me, the gravity of all my drinking, not just that last bender. There was about 5 days blackout drinking. I couldn't remember anything. But from that little kid in the park when I was 13, all the way, you know, some 20 odd years later, to that man, face down, covered in blood and piss in his little unit, it all came bearing down on me. And I kind of saw it for what it was for a minute, the first time, and I was forced to reach out to this universe or this ether or this God or whatever you want to call it. I certainly didn't believe it, and I said not a very humble prayer, and I won't repeat it on radio, but it was, "You with an F, fix me, please." And I think it was the first time I'd actually got honest in, well, maybe ever. And, you know, there was no flashes of light. There was no, or anything like that. It was just, my mind stopped in that instant. And in hindsight, now all these years later, I know what happened in that moment. And this may or may not happen for you, or may not happen for every alcoholic, but in that moment, that obsession, that compulsion, that absolute crazy desire to check out of reality left me, and I became willing. I realised that my ideas were finished, that my ideas were done, and that my very, very best thinking had got me at the age of 39 lying face down, covered in urine and blood, and with multiple injuries. And that was the best I could do, and so I reached out to this universe, and that evening, for one reason or another, through a bizarre set of circumstances, it felt like at the time, but I now believe it was divine providence. I was standing on the doorstep of a man who, I was 39 years old and he was 39 years sober, which I thought was quite ironic. That it's, you know, I realised this was all the universe's grand plan, and you know, and life now, these 11.5 years later, I just can't begin to convey to you. And if you're new and listening to this, I was saying this from the bottom of my heart. This, from going to AA and really getting stuck in and being fair dinkum. That's what my old sponsor was, you know, from the old school. And he says, "Are you fair dinkum?" And I said, "Yeah, I am fair dinkum." And I just listened to him. I gave up. You know, my mind was racing. I was full of rage, full of anger. I didn't know what joy was. I didn't know what happiness was. I didn't know what peace was. Those things had left me 20 years before. I couldn't even remember what they were like. But all I knew was fear, anxiety, and rage. And but what happened is I just came to AA. I came there every day, and I did not want to go there. And if I'm honest, I hated it. And it didn't matter what I thought and how I felt. Really didn't matter anymore, because I knew I was finished, and I just did what this man told me to do. And it was very simple what he told me to do. He just said, "Daniel, put AA at the top of the perch." And I thought about that, and I thought, well, okay, I've got no friends, I've got no partner, I've got no job, got no idea how to stay sober, I've got a mountain of debt, and so there's not really anything standing in the way of me going along to one of these meetings every day. And so I did. And, wow, I'm so glad I did, because what I did, by doing that, I did hundreds and hundreds of meetings in a row. And by doing that, I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but what I was doing, I was building a solid foundation so I could launch myself back into life when the time came, when the right time came. And I didn't know when that was going to be. But for me, it was after just under a year. Just under a year. I was probably 11 months sober and about 350 meetings in. And because sometimes I'd do 2 a day because the first one was so rubbish, I'd have to do another one. And please don't take offense, because these meetings are, in my opinion, the greatest movement for social recovery that in the 20th century. Started by 2 men in 1935 and now across the world in 200 odd countries, and then millions and millions of brothers and sisters I've got out there. And I can do this AA thing at the moment. I'm sitting in Port Pirie and sitting at the ocean and doing this little share for you guys, and my life's amazing. You know, it's a paradox. I was born full of fear. Alcohol took away that fear. Then by the end of my drinking, I was not feeling anything. I was an animal. I put down the drink, became full of fear again. I did the AA program and the fear left me. Today I don't live in fear. I got a career of my dreams. And, you know, of course life goes on with it, with not, you know, it's not all rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. It's, you know, I've had some tragedy and trauma in my sobriety, but with the love and support of my brothers and sisters in AA, I've been able to get through anything. And, you know, the paradox is that, you know, first, after, like I said, 11 months, I just remember waking up one day and the anxiety and the fear was gone. And all I'd been doing was going to these meetings. I didn't have a job or a new girlfriend or a new place. I was still pretty miserable. But this one day I just woke up and thought, you know, I've been doing these meetings every day. I'm starting to feel different. And this day I felt really different. And I felt the presence of some power. Just driving to a meeting, I was on Green Hill Road, and I just felt some power. And this voice came into my head and said, you know what, Daniel, if you keep doing this, you just might be happy one day. Because at this stage, I wasn't sure what happiness was. All these feelings were coming. Is that peace? Is that contentment? Is that happiness? I can't even remember. It was all like having a brand new experiences. But now, and then, you know, so I kept going and I did. I launched myself into a new career, which I still have today, 10 years later, and I've progressed through the ranks there to manage a facility, a mental health facility, which is just beyond conception, considering where I came from. You know, I should have been a patient there forever, but now, you know, I run the place almost, and I've got fantastic friends. I'm a part of this fellowship. It's my lifeblood, and it's my foundation, and it's my rock, and you know, and it's quite simple. I just go to 3 or 4 meetings a week, and I'm able to live my life out here, and I travel. I've done more travelling than in the last 11 and 12 years than I did for the 39 before that, or probably 10 times more. And I'm free. You know, I'm free of the slavery. You know, that little prayer I said, you know, in early March 2012, when I was out in that deep water, I felt like, and the hand of God just reached down into that water and picked me out, put me on this lifeboat. And on the lifeboat I had AA, and I had no idea where I was going. But I can tell you now, I'm not jumping out of that lifeboat back in with the sharks into the deep water, because that's insane. And all I have to do is, you know, just keep talking about my story, keep talking about my life, keep in contact with AA, keep going to AA. And, you know, and I'm still not religious, but I'm very spiritual. I have a strong faith in God. And so, you know, I went from thinking I'd be happy to actually being happy. Then I had a few tragedies in life, which sort of, you know, I had to get through. But I've learned that suffering is a part of living. It's a part of growing. Without pain, there is no joy, and vice versa. Without light, there is no darkness, and vice versa. They're both just part of the human experience, and we can't have one without the other, unfortunately. And that's just life. But there's no escaping. There's no running. There's facing up to it with AA, with my higher power, and there's nothing I can't get through, and I know that. And now, just I went from now extremely grateful for being sober to I'm just sitting here now and at Solomon Beach, and it's not the most attractive beach I've been to. I've been to many beaches in sobriety, but I'm not just grateful to be sober. I'm not just grateful to be a part of AA. I'm grateful just to exist. And I never thought those words would come out of my mouth. I am grateful to exist in this universe because it's a beautiful thing. You know, the sun, the sky, the stars, the water, the mountains, the animals, the people, and I get to be a part of that. Existence in its very essence is just a beautiful thing. That coming from someone like me who, you know, has been in jail and homeless, and it's just amazing. It's all because, you know, I just made some decisions. They weren't huge decisions, but they were decisions nonetheless. I made a few decisions, and I'm forever grateful. And you know, anyone listening to this, God bless you. You know, and if you know, or higher power bless you, or the universe bless you, whatever you want it to be, there is something out there, and it's got your back, and it loves you, and doesn't take a lot to tap into it. Just need to be able to do it with a clear mind and the conscious mind, and not the unconscious mind. There's nothing there to see. And so, yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and yeah, hope to see you in AA. Take care.